Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by Hiscox. Do you have the proper insurance for your startup? Get the right insurance right now with Hiscox. Tailored coverage starts at only $22.50 per month. Visit hiscox.com/smallbiz to get a quote. And by Walker Corporate Law, a boutique corporate law firm specializing in the representation of entrepreneurs. For more information, visit them at walkercorporatelaw.com. And by Amazon Web Services. The fastest growing, hottest startups build their businesses on Amazon Web Services. Learn more at aws.amazon.com/startups.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis. This is This Week in Startups. I'm live here at WeWork in San Francisco. My guest today will be Steve Jurvetson of Draper Fisher Jurvetson. Stick with us. It's going to be an amazing program.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Jason Calacanis, and this is This Week in Startups. I'm here live at... It's a pretty good intro, right?
That was it, like time warp.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's like a professional show. You get good after 400 episodes. Sucked the first 200, but thank you all for listening anyway. I've been waiting to have Steve Jurvetson on the program since the beginning. It's taken a little while, but Steve is just a tremendous investor who's taken a ton of risks. And a couple of years ago, he might not look as smart as he does right now, but he's looking fairly brilliant based on a couple of huge bets. That took a lot of guts. I mean, let's just get to the first one, Tesla Motors. You invested in Tesla Motors and almost lost everything.
Oh yeah, so did almost
Two
everyone.
or three times.
Yeah, almost everyone who invests in a car company usually loses everything.
Right.
Ever since Henry Ford, that's been the rule of thumb. And in the case of Tesla, they had a near-death experience in December 2008 and a few other times along the way. It's hard to start a car company. Yeah.
So when Elon came to you, or the team came to you with the idea for an electric car company, they kind of got laughed out of the room at a lot of places, but you wrote a check. Tell me about those first meetings and how you decided to overcome the fear of investing, a very valid fear, of investing in a car company, which VCs generally don't do.
Yeah. So, and also the pattern that most would reject whatever it is really the pattern of greatness, meaning if I think of all the companies that have done well in our portfolio, from Hotmail to the present day, most venture capitalists thought they were a bad investment, right? The vast majority. And if everyone thought it was a good idea, it's really not changing the world. So in the specific case of Tesla, you had a really compelling story. We met with some others. There were some other different approaches to how one might create an electrified automobile industry. But this company clearly had a pragmatic path to get there. It wasn't like a small idea, it was a big idea, but they had steps to get there, through the Roadster, to the Model S, eventually to a Gen 3 vehicle, as they call it, that perhaps deluded me into thinking we could actually get there with our funding. In retrospect, there's no way we could have gotten there with our funding, but it got us drinking the Kool-Aid and believing in the vision, and luckily other sources of capital came along.
And so the specific strategy of how to get there was what? That impressed you, because it wasn't just, hey, we're making an electric car, because a lot of people did have that idea.
That's right.
There was something about the strategy Elon had put forward that made it viable.
That's exactly right. So, and a similar strategy at SpaceX, by the way, if you want to talk about that later, which is start with commercial off-the-shelf components whenever possible, put them together into a system in a new way that hasn't been done before. So in this case, the Roadster, and SpaceX, the Falcon 1, that proves that the general idea works. In this case, that an electric car can actually be a high-performance vehicle people would want, right? Even if in the Roadster's case, it's low volume and limited in certain ways, it nevertheless proved it could be high performance, then that customers want it. That gave the company credibility with just about everyone. Think about the supply chain of automotive components. Hard to get these people to deal with this with a small company, easier to do with a company when you have success. Similarly, the capital required to do, in a sense, a Lotus Elise conversion, a lot of hand labor, a lot of low volume manufacturing processes can be used when you're low volume. And then once you have enough credibility to raise large sums of money, like $1 billion, you could build a manufacturing plant of the scale of what's now the former NUMMI plant. That would be a daunting task to do right at the get-go, to say from standing start, we're going to have a fully automated robotic line, right? The capital requirements are too high. So it's sort of prove the capabilities to be able to gain credibility to raise the larger sum of money it takes to do phase 2 of the business later.
Take us to the time in Christmas of 2008 when it was 2 or 3 days before Christmas, and if the deal didn't get done, Tesla was done, as I heard it.
Yeah, and as Elon would recount it as well. So you heard the accurate story. The company was out of money, couldn't make payroll, was burning over $3 million a month of cash, which is a dangerous place to be. And when it's draining that fast at the bottom of the funnel. Negative gross margin car, so selling more wouldn't help, meaning the more you sell, the more you lose money, unless you re-engineer something. So it took some time to fix that problem. You had problems keeping a CEO on the job, and the largest
CEO who made it a negative margin product. Right.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
Exactly. Then you hired another one who theoretically was going to help but didn't, and then there's no CEO, and Elon's sort of doing it part-time but not intending to do it full-time at that point. You also had, which not many people know, the largest investor openly hostile to the concept of Elon being CEO. Just like doesn't want him, won't talk to the company if he's CEO, and thinks the strategy's broken. That's tough to fundraise.
So literally one of the top VCs in the company thinks Elon Musk is the wrong guy for the job.
That's right. And
how smart is that guy looking right now?
Yeah, we can come back to that later. That's a fun one. In fact, let's come back to that later once we get through this dark period.
Yeah, get through the dark period.
Because we'll say, like, how do people change their recollection of events after the fact? It's kind of interesting.
Yes, exactly.
But it gets worse. Goldman Sachs has just tried to do a private fundraising and failed. So you have a proof point that, at least those guys can't even raise money for the company. None of the insiders are willing to write a check, and they need $40 million to get to any kind of meaningful next step. And no one's offering it. And by the way, this is when there's no Daimler deal, there's no DOE loan, there's just the Roadster, and it's not a profitable product, even at the gross margin layer. So Elon took the first incredibly bold step of writing a check for around $3 to $4 million. I think it might have been 3 to 4 million. It was about the last money he had. He was already dipping into debt to do this. He borrowed $20 million on the side with all of his stock pledged as collateral to borrow $20 million to then save the company. And what he did was he said, I'll do the $40 million, and to hell with all you, right? I mean, not literally to hell with you, but like, I don't need you. I'm just going to do it, right? When people ask, where's this money coming from? He didn't have $40 million, but he spoke for it confidently. And it sort of shifted people's thinking. When you define an investment and you say, it's happening, the train's leaving the station, do you want to be on that train? It's a different question to investors than, do you want to start with a blank sheet of paper and you don't know if others will follow and make an offer, right? No one was making an offer. But once there was a defined offer, and Elon was saying he would speak for any amount of it. If you don't take your piece, I'll take it, right? For anyone. All of a sudden, fear shifted to greed, which is a good thing to do with your investors, get them to shift that way. And then all of a sudden, everyone wanted their piece, and Elon's like, I'm taking, at least I think 16 million of it at the end of the day. I won't let go below that, but we and everyone else were delighted to do as much of it as we could because we knew there was enough money to get somewhere. So if you think about these two things he did, the first one was the craziest investment you could possibly imagine. Put $3 million into a company when it will get you nowhere. It's not like a bridge to a financing. It's not a bridge to anything. It's a pier, and the car's going very fast down this pier, and you just add some more planks with your last remaining money. Right. That was the ballsiest thing I've ever seen an entrepreneur do, ever, in any context. Slightly more intelligent for all was, if there is $40 million, do you want to be part of it? That's a much more reasonable investment decision to make, because that $40 million, and sure enough it did, got the company to fix the gross margin problems, get a time enough to resolve, is there going to be a DOE loan or not? Is there going to be a Daimler deal? They were close but not done deals. And they both did fall in place, and all of a sudden the company looked in a much better position. Right. Yeah.
And the Model S is years in the making. When did you know that this would be what Consumer Reports described as the best car that's ever been made? Like, did you, because Elon seemed to think it was, and I remember talking to him about it, and he said, this is going to be I think this could be the best car ever made. When did you actually believe that? Or sense that yourself,
Well, I mean, I hate to say it's when I first drove in one. I mean, I'd like to say, I knew it from first principles. I knew it in my gut the way he did. And maybe he got to drive a prototype before I did, and so he had it in his gut because of that. But I knew it would be great because I had a Roadster starting in 2008. I've driven Teslas now for 5 years, and I loved the Roadster. I thought it was great. I wouldn't have said it's the best car ever made. It had a certain set of compromises, but it was so fun.
Yeah.
It still is. That I thought, I don't know if it'll hit that hurdle, but it'll be a great product, and it would be lovely even if it's just large enough to fit inside, that this would be a big step forward.
As opposed to the Roadster, which
Exactly.
is a little bit of work to get inside.
It's a little bit of a shimmy to get in there. Yeah, exactly. But then the moment I drove one, I'm like, oh my God, this is unlike any car. At that moment, I had clarity. I will never drive a gas car again in my life. Right? It just, unless I'm forced to, like a rental car or something.
Right.
Which I am occasionally forced to, and they are horrible.
Yeah, it's bizarre to hit the gas pedal and have it not take off like a rocket.
Yeah, it is weird. I was driving actually in the Google Robocar, and they've kind of wimped out, and they make you drive it onto the highway, and then it takes over. It used to be you could do the whole thing just sitting there. And I found it more disorienting to drive a Lexus gas car than to have the robot take over. I mean, that was like totally a natural experience. Whereas driving a gas car, I was like, oh my God, this is dangerous. I don't like, it's not moving the way I expect it to. It's sloppy. It's sloppy. Anyway, yeah, we get spoiled.
So when, as somebody who almost lost a large amount of money as a venture capitalist, it would have certainly been a black eye for you. When you see the Consumer Reports come out, the Autoblog first review, the Road and Track reviews, Car of the Year, all this stuff start coming out. How does that feel as a VC?
Oh my God, it is the greatest feeling in the world. We live vicariously through the success of our entrepreneurs, so it's not like we've done any of this. But when you're rooting for them and cheering for them and you're believing in them, and when they have success that is unprecedented in history, it blows. Those are the best moments in my career, and on all scales. So it was judged the safest car ever made, including SUVs and vans. Wow.
Yeah.
And Road and Track said it's the most important car in American history.
We've had a lot
which
of
includes
cars.
the Model T.
Yeah.
There's been some important cars in American history.
Yeah.
This is mind-blowing. And it really does feel like the more important revolution, because in a way, if you think about it, mass manufacturing is important, but someone else would have done it. If you ask yourself, if that hadn't happened, what would history look like? And in the case of a lot of things in the automotive space, something close to what happened probably would have happened. In the case of this next phase of the EV transition, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, or maybe even 20 years, you can tell that the future is going to arrive sooner than it might otherwise have.
All right, when we get back, let's talk, continuing the Elon Musk theme, about SpaceX and rockets and space, your big passion, when we get back from this commercial break. Hiscox Small Business, yes, customized coverage and competitive pricing on small business insurance. You absolutely need to have small business insurance. I know you're busy with your startup, your minimal viable product, hiring people, raising money, updating your AngelList profile, trying to buy a decent domain name and getting rid of your .is or .to terrible domain name. You're busy. But that's what Hiscox is for. You have no excuse to not have small business insurance. You can buy insurance directly through the insurer instead of through an agent, and no nonsense with an agent trying to, you know what they do sometimes. Anyway, you get tailored coverage, so you fill out a couple web forms, and then it's such a simple process. They email you all the docs, and the competitive rates they have start from just like $22 a month. So you have no excuse. You can get a base plan now. As you get bigger and you raise more money, you can start upping that plan and have even more protection. And you want to protect yourself because there's so many of these attorneys out there who are chasing startup companies because they know that you might have something of value and you may have forgotten to do what you need to do as a startup. And you don't even have to do something wrong. They just sue. It's just disgusting and horrible. But you need to have a partner like Hiscox Small Business. They have a passion for service. 96% of their customers would recommend it to a friend. And you can get all this simple tailored coverage through a very simple web format. You could do it at 2 o'clock in the morning. With great value, of course. And you can do that by going to hiscoxusa.com/smallbiz. 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 They really are a great company, and a lot of people in the community, the This Week in Startups community, have used them. They have customized and tailored this service and this web system for buying it, right? It's like almost like insurance as a service to the industry and the risks you have. So if you're an editorial shop versus an e-commerce shop versus a social network, they ask you that and they tailor the insurance to protect you because they don't believe that in that one-size-fits-all coverage. They want to tailor it specifically to you so you're not paying for what you're not using. Thank you, Hiscox Small Biz. Everybody can thank them on Twitter. Hiscox Small Biz is their Twitter handle. Let's get back to this amazing interview. All right, welcome back. I'm here at WeWork. It's a little bit of a time warp. We went through a wormhole. I'm here at WeWork with Steve Jurvetson.
It's the TiVo experience.
Exactly, TiVo experience of taping a show. We're here at WeWork with a great live audience. Go ahead, you can cheer for a second.
Yeah.
Live audience. They're cheering for you, Steve.
They found their voice.
They're cheering for you, Steve. And we left our hero, Steve Jurvetson, Managing Director at Draper Fisher Jurvetson. How long have you been at VC?
95. So,
Since 95?
Yeah.
How old were you when you started in the venture capital biz?
20-something. 6, 8, 28?
Wow.
28.
That's as young as it comes in the VC business.
You have to do the math. I don't actually know my age ever. I do the referential pointer.
So next big bet, SpaceX. Now, you did that bet before Tesla.
Oh, 26. Shit, I did the math wrong.
Yeah, 26 years. Over 2 decades as a venture capitalist. When did you do SpaceX before Tesla or after?
Wait, no, I did the math wrong again. 28. Fuck, it's 28. Okay, what was the question?
Did you invest in SpaceX before or after Tesla?
Sounds like a courtroom.
Yes,
I did.
sir.
It was Tesla then SpaceX. And
Tesla,
the reason
SpaceX.
it's very memorable is we got to know about the SpaceX experience from the Tesla interaction. So we had invested in the Rive brothers, which are Elon's cousins, and I had known Elon since January 1996, actually, when he pitched Zip2 to us, and then we made an offer to PayPal, but got outbid. So our first engagement with Musk and Co. and family was in Tesla, and then June 2006 was when we first invested in Tesla, and then it would have been probably 2008 commitment, closing early 2009 into SpaceX.
Now, SpaceX is another one of these, what would you call them, high variance kind of experiences. The first couple of rockets didn't quite make it, although they were promising, and that too was a company that was on the brink of extinction.
Yeah, the metaphors of failure to launch or blowing up on the pad, these become very real and tangible when it comes to rockets. So when you say it didn't quite go well, the rocket, one of the 3 failures in a row, it went up, but then it came back down and just oh my God, it was brutal.
Luckily, that was on an island.
Yes, yes, exactly, on an atoll, Kwajalein Island, middle of nowhere. I guess where the Air Force likes to put things like this. So yeah, 3 failures in a row makes you start to wonder if you got the formula right. And they had planned for the possibility of 2 failures, and then the third would need to be a success for the business to work. But they, seeing 2 failures in a row and going to the third, managed to scrap together enough to build a 4th rocket. And we invested just prior to that launch with our fingers crossed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that took guts, and that made it to space.
Yep. Launched a Malaysian satellite into space. Yep.
And what is the scale of SpaceX? Because I feel like SpaceX has almost been overshadowed by what's happened with the Model S and Tesla, but they have $1 billion or so in contracts with the government or something?
Yeah, the overshadowing, I think, could be within the obvious, the population at large, because when you produce a consumer product, a lot of consumers can understand it and might want it or at least use it. So we've always noticed that our consumer portfolio, however you define it, be it a Skype or a Hotmail or a Tesla, people are going to know what it's about at a dinner time conversation. In the case of SpaceX, a fair number of people know about it because they're doing amazing things, but not everybody cares about space in the same way that we do. But yes, they have over $4 billion of backlog. They've been profitable 6 years in a row. They're perhaps one of the most financially interesting companies under the covers that we've ever seen.
And what makes them financially interesting is that they've figured out a way to put a lot of margin into these rockets?
Yeah, and the sheer scale of it. When you're competing with companies that are happily charging $100 million to $1 billion, like the shuttle on average per launch, or today about $500 million for the military launches, and you look at the cost of goods and it's less than 1% of that, you're like, what is going on here, right? Where is the inefficiency coming in? And that's what gave Elon confidence, even before he knew how he would do it, that there was a plump opportunity here. I mean, because you think about it, you're an immigrant from South Africa, you come to the United States, you're like, I'm going to take on the military-industrial complex. What do they know about rockets, right?
Right.
I've never built one, but hey, and then from first principles, I mean, he literally convinced himself that there's an opportunity here, and why don't I approach this the way a software engineer might with modular reuse, where I build one engine, prove it on the Falcon 1, Then once I prove that engine works, put 9 of that exact same engine to have a Falcon 9 that's larger and more interesting satellites. Use that same engine in the upper stage as the boost phase, so you don't have 2 different technologies. None of the other rockets in the world do it that way. They instead farm out jobs to different states so they can get bills passed in their favor. You can't run and it's not to blame them. It's the only way to get a project of the billion-dollar scale financed through our government is get more than one state to benefit from it.
Right.
So they divide something into a Frankenstein, like the shuttle. Solid boosters from there, liquid engines from here, some other company there. Right.
And sadly, it makes it less safe as well.
Of course. The shuttle is probably the least safe thing that's ever taken people to orbit.
And just last week, or Sunday, I guess, the Falcon 9 delivered a Canadian rocket.
A satellite.
Satellite, I'm sorry.
That's right.
The Falcon 9 rocket put a satellite into space.
That's right.
How meaningful was that event in history?
Well, depends on how...
Because, I mean, you are a student of all this
Yes.
space stuff.
It depends on whether the history books look at it from a business perspective, or even from a technology perspective. So there are 2 major breakthroughs that this rocket entailed, and it was sort of subtly hidden. It's just version 1.1. So like on the software point of view, it'd be like, wait, version 1? This is version 1.1. You'd think it's a .1 release. But it had new engines, it's taller, larger lift capacity, tested a supersonic retro burn to come back towards the launch pad to land propulsively. That was, we'll get to that later. That didn't do that, but that was tested parts of that.
The Grasshopper.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Grasshopper is the name of the test vehicle, but it's the thing you can see that's doing what we're talking about. It had a big fairing, this carbon fiber clamshell thing that holds satellites they can be the size of a Greyhound bus, but just having helium pneumatic actuators that pop it apart. I mean, it's not undoable. I mean, it's doable, but they've never been done before by them. All of these new things are all just .1 release, and typical Elon Musk, the entire company is bet on that working. Meaning, there's no plan B. Like Falcon 1.0, there are no more of them. This has to work for any of that revenue to happen. So that's important that work. And it would eventually work. It's just you'd like to have it work soon, not after a failure or 2. And then much more important from a history book perspective would be, I'm not sure if this launch would get credit for the first time the key components were tested that this actually is going to work to recover the booster. And the reason that's so important is that if you throw away your rocket after every launch, it's pretty expensive, right? Like if you threw away a 747 after each one-way hop.
The ticket price would go up.
Yeah, only where doesn't governments would fly, right? Yeah. It's pretty much space, right? Wannabe governments, all around the planet, and the ilk. So, a 10, maybe 100-fold reduction in the cost of launch is ahead of us if they can get this thing reusable.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, so it should be cheaper to fly in orbit around the Earth than to fly a comparable jet with the same number of people around the Earth.
And when do these rockets from SpaceX start delivering humans? Has that been discussed? I mean, obviously.
No, it's well underway. It's just, it's tough to know whether you want to go which level of aggressiveness, because people in the industry wouldn't believe some of the hopes and dreams, let's say. But if it's on a normal government kind of timetable, they've got this series of milestones and things where,
Couple of years?
Well, that would be on the aggressive side. They're looking more like 3 to 4 years, yeah. But there's there's some other cool things you can do, like going around the moon, things like that might also happen in a similar time frame.
Getting to the moon. Humans. Or just...
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, send something there.
Did that actually happen, the moon landing, do you think?
What do you know?
Exactly. Well, you're a student of...
No, I asked Neil, Armstrong about that. Just curious, like, how do you... Not that I believed it, but like...
Right. How do you
react to people saying this kind of stuff? And like Buzz Aldrin actually punched someone who was accusing him of that. So that's how he reacts.
I risk my life.
Right. How dare you challenge me? But Neil had a much more pragmatic answer, which is something like there were 600,000 people, contractors, developers, academics involved with the space program, and given the lack of simulation skills, like there were not computers to simulate crap on the fly. To fool that many people would be much harder and much more expensive than to actually just go do it.
Right.
I mean, that seems compelling to me. And of course, the latest L-Cross mission, this thing that took very high-resolution photos around the moon recently, just within the last year, showed not only, of course, that they're all there and the footprints are there, but it verified something that I heard from Buzz Aldrin directly, which is the Apollo 11 flag did blow over and is no more, the fabric part at least. But all the other ones are still standing and casting a shadow. It blew over on takeoff. So the first flying on the moon was only there for like a few hours.
Why is space important? You know, a lot of people are looking at the problems of this planet, like carbon, and the temperature increasing a degree every X number of years. Why should anybody care about space? Because it does seem like our government and the populace at large don't really care about NASA. In fact, they sort of have voted to make it smaller in some ways. Why should we care about space?
I think on two different levels. So in the near term, there's a bunch of business, pragmatic things that actually will help Earth, and then the bigger question would be why explore? Why do why colonize Mars or something? For example, very different kind of business. So in the near term, there's all kinds of great things, right? We all kind of like GPS systems, right? We like the Google Maps that we all have, right? And Google Earth.
Pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, yeah, especially in Tesla with satellite view, where you can like see where you are in the backyard of wherever you're going. Soon there'll be a San Francisco-based company, for example, that's using this lower cost of launch to re-engineer the entire concept of a satellite so that you'll be able to image the entire Earth, every meter of the Earth, every day. So every crop on the planet, how healthy is it for commodities pricing, disaster response, what have you. Like if there's deforestation in the Amazon, catch them while they're doing it, or illegal fishing, catch them while they're doing it. Don't see satellite imagery.
So we're going to be able
delayed.
to map the planet
every day.
Daily. So when
Every
I
day.
see in my driveway on Google Maps the car from 4 years ago that I no longer own.
Yes, with the one caveat that with that specific example, that car will just be a pixel. So the resolution of this is more like a 5-meter resolution, not the SpySat kind of resolution, which means cars in a parking lot you could count, but they'd be smudges. So from a privacy perspective, you're not going to do daily snooping, but you might be able to run an app on it which says, let me count how many cars are in every Walmart parking lot every day.
Fascinating.
For who knows what day trading nuisance. Yeah.
So,
but that was just so near-term commercial space. What's new? Okay, so you're going to have better Earth observation and apps built on top of that for humanitarian needs,
seems nice.
Transparency, disaster response, firefighting. That's all cool.
Okay.
Nice. Nice is probably true.
Amelia Earhart would be found.
Exactly. Well, I don't know. Yeah.
If she did crash on an atoll, and we would have found her, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah. Certainly, you could track ships around and see where,
okay.
do they really disappear in the Bermuda Triangle or not?
Got it.
And a bunch of things we can't anticipate off this sort of, cloud services from above the clouds, if you will.
Right.
A lot of big data and all open, available to developers. And that's kind of cool. Then imagine, that's just Earth observation, but, broadband for the planet everywhere, Wi-Fi or something like it, pretty much blanketing the Earth from space. That's in development and discussion.
Not the loon project of weather balloons.
No, yeah.
But you're talking about.
We're not loons. Those are
going to the middle of the Sahara Desert and being able to get a decent connection.
Yeah, and it'll be the same everywhere because it's based on satellites passing overhead, not.
Who's doing that? Is there a company?
There's proposals being.
Really?
But
are these
put this in the
public?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
No. But it's
so
doable.
there are proposals and people out there pitching a legendary VC on Wi-Fi for the planet. So we could get like one Boingo account that it just works for planet Earth.
Actually works, yeah.
You just hit the checkbox on Boingo planet Earth, not like US or Asia, planet Earth.
That's right. And the reason that's
pretty awesome.
Things that weren't, but back in the early days of Hughes, when people were looking at what would you want to use satellites for, and unfortunately it was cable TV was the conclusion. Such a step backwards for humanity, but nevertheless, the idea of broadband data has been tried. There's some experiments underway that are steps in this direction, but ultimately, if you can take what was a very expensive satellite and then make it almost disposable as a thought experiment, you can rethink how you deploy these services in very interesting ways.
Fascinating. Now, what about getting beyond our own wants and needs on the planet Earth? What could we expect? Well, I heard one person saying the whole reason Elon is doing all this is to get minerals off of asteroids, and there's some business in the minerals on asteroids.
There is at least 3 or 4 companies that think, maybe there are other companies out there that are doing that specifically.
Do you believe there is a business in mining asteroids?
That to me is the farthest out of the opportunities.
Okay.
And Elon wants to do something maybe much simpler, just colonize Mars and make us a multi-planetary species and leave the minerals there, because why bring them here? That has its own level of breathless kind of aspiration. You think about the scope of his ambition.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, wow, that would be in the history books.
Yeah.
Like
colonize another planet.
Columbus, multi-planetary species. And his motivation is kind of a weird logic, which just says we will eventually snuff ourselves out on this planet, and we got to have a hedge.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, there's some logic to that. You just wait for that. There's like two types of civilizations: those that are multi-planetary and those that don't last that long.
Right.
In the cosmic scale of things. So he founded SpaceX with that goal in mind. And everything that he's doing along the way is a really brilliant way to have commercial hop, skips, and jumps to that bold goal. Yep.
So let's look at venture investing, angel investing, just investing in general. What have you learned in 2.5 decades of doing this?
God, it hasn't been that long.
Well, 2 decades.
Our firm
right?
has. Our firm has been around for that long, and I've done it since 95. So.
Okay, close to 20 years.
Close
2
to 20
decades. I'm
years,
sorry.
yep.
2 decades of doing this. What have you learned?
A whole bunch of stuff. Where do you want to start? Like people, company, like.
Yeah, people.
Well,
ideas.
sometimes.
Like,
Well, the thing that I'm thinking about the most now, but it may not be what you want to, is more the process learning that can go on, not the product learning. So not, was it smart to be investing in clean tech or internet or regionally like China or the US or by stage, early versus late stage, but how can a firm like ours be more effective by thinking about things like team size, voting policies, hiring policies that promote cognitive diversity? These are all process variables that you could correlate with investment returns over time, but wouldn't necessarily be the way anyone looks at it, nor tracks it, nor thinks, well, is that the logical way to think about optimizing your business? But in many ways, if you're running an innovative enterprise, for example, if you're a group of programmers, thinking about keeping your team size to 5 plus or minus 2 might be more important than almost anything else you do. Similarly, as you're hiring, not hiring just the best at certainly any knowledge set or even thinking style, but seeking cognitive diversity within some band of capabilities is probably more important than just raw ability.
what does cognitive diversity mean?
Like how you approach things. Are you not, like simple things would be optimist, pessimist, expansive, sort of, divergent thinker or convergent thinker. Not that you necessarily want to look for these, but we often feel most comfortable working with people that are like ourselves, right? This homophily bias, as it's described, like I want to be around people that speak quickly and don't waste my time, right? Just because that's what I do. It's just my little thing, right? I like people who are optimistic.
But it's not necessarily good for you. Right? You need to have a slow thinker.
It'd be good if I had a doubting Thomas somewhere on the team, right?
Right.
For
Fascinating.
example.
All right, when we get back, let's go through some of your other hits and misses, the investments that keep you up at night that you didn't make when we get back from this commercial break. Yes. The Walker Corporate Law Group. Scott Walker, thank you so much for being one of the longest sponsors of This Week in Startups. And if you don't know by now, Walker Corporate Law is a boutique law firm that specializes in the representation of entrepreneurs and startups. And what's really unique about this firm is that they're all there for the right reason. These are attorneys who worked at some of the big, huge firms with those crazy expensive office spaces that wind up hitting your bill every month. And as a startup, I can tell you, managing legal bills and costs is absolutely critical because, hey, you take 10, 20% and you lower your costs by 10, 20%, you know what happens? You get 3, 4, 5, 6 months left to figure out how to make your startup work. It's very critical that every dollar goes into your product, and legal bills can sink you. But our friends at the Walker Corporate Law Group know this, and they are on your side. They've got these great attorneys, but they have a small boutique firm, which means they can do it the way they want to do it, which means fixed fees. You tell them what you want to get done, they give you a fee. Then you don't have to worry about sticker shock when you get your bill, that they ran up the bill, being inefficient. And you know what, Scott? It gives exceptional service. Their client, Mighty Text, which got a great write-up in TechCrunch, engaged Walker Corporate Law for their $2,900 all-you-can-eat startup package. What a great deal. $2,900 all-you-can-eat? Sign me up. And they use them for their seed financing and their stock option plan. They do mergers and acquisitions, licensing agreements, terms of service, privacy policies. Go ahead and call Scott directly. He's a personal friend of mine. 415-979-9998. 415-979-9998. Tell Scott that Jason sent you. We're good friends. He's going to take care of you, I promise. He'll do a great job. Scott at walkercorporatelaw.com is his email. He responds directly. He comes to all the events. He's at the Launch Festival. He's at the This Week in Startups Live. He's a tremendous force for good in the startup community. 415-979-9998. Thank you, Scott. And let's get back to the program. All right, we're back, and we're here at WeWork with a live audience. Thanks again to our friends at WeWork. for helping us put the show on, and they've been so great to me. They gave me a beautiful studio here to do my show out of, and every other month we do a live fireside chat with somebody who is awesome. And today that person is Steve Jurvetson of Draper Fisher Jurvetson. We talked about just some awesome victories, like you probably invested in Tesla at $1 a share or 50 cents a share?
God, I don't remember.
Below $1.
It was something low, yeah.
It's at
It was the first venture round, so.
So you're at $190 or something crazy. Did you sell all your shares? Or
I never sell a share of anything I invest in.
Oh, really? You just keep the shares forever?
Mm-hmm. And give them away to charity. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Eventually. So that's kind of a sell decision.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. I like to bet on them. And so it's really empowering an entrepreneur to say, I'm never going to sell your shares. And at first they're like, ha, 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 yeah, you're right, sure. Everyone sells them. Oh,
so what are some examples of that? Like
all the Hotmail shares, I've donated all that Microsoft that got acquired.
Yeah.
Same for 411, which is acquired by Yahoo, and working through it, all the Skype stuff's gone. Because I don't want to hold Microsoft. I mean, where's that going?
Yeah. Yeah, where is that going?
Yeah, but I'm holding on to all the Tesla, so I haven't donated any Tesla. I haven't donated any. Also, being on the board of a public company,
so what? You just
generally
feel like
it's easier just not to.
You have enough money. You don't want to buy Lanai or anything, or
right? For what reason? There's a whole lot of labor headaches when you buy Lanai.
So
you own a whole island, right? And all the people and all their healthcare. I'm like, wow. Like, why not just go to the Four Seasons on Lanai?
They do have nice rooms. Yeah, you can rent them.
Right.
You don't need to buy Lanai.
Right. It's crazy.
There are some people who have this crazy thing when they feel like they need to buy the island.
Yeah, it was funny because Gates wanted to buy it, but Larry Ellison got it. So Gates instead bought a big chunk, I think with some Middle Eastern dude, of the Four Seasons. So it's like, Ellison got Lanai, but I have the Four Seasons. There are only 2 hotels in Lanai.
I know.
Yeah.
So now he owns wow. And you're just going to give your Tesla shares
I'm just going to be a guest, paying normal rates. Like, thank you very much.
And give your Tesla shares away.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the misses.
Mm.
I mean, did you have Larry and Sergey come pitch you, or
No, I can luckily say that's when I didn't screw up because I wasn't around, but a couple of my other partners did, and was like, oh, we should do this, but just didn't really ever get. So
Draper Fisher Jurvetson did miss.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
After meeting it.
Biggest miss is Google, Facebook, where we were the underbidder to Excel. So if you read Kirkpatrick's books, it's like, wow, we keep going up and up. And I mean, so there's nothing worse than dropping out of an auction because the price got just a little too high
and losing 1,000x.
Yeah, 100 million. Yeah, that hurts. Baidu was better though, interestingly, by far than Facebook. Same time period.
Which one?
Baidu. So it was about five times better Series A to present day in roughly the same time period.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And
no one knows it because it's just in China. And, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what have you missed?
PayPal. That was the most painful to me, and I only realized that recently. So it wasn't painful at the time, meaning, here's what happened. So we presented I presented the first term sheet to Confinity, Luke Nosek, and Peter Thiel, and I think they thought it was low. And they got an offer 4 times higher from Nokia. And this is when the whole business idea was we're going to beam currency infrared ports between phones. There was no concept of a PC version of it, much like Skype. There's no concept of Skype on desktops initially. Mobile phones are where the future is, right? And so that's why Nokia, as an investor, made some sense. They were, for those old enough to remember, right? They mattered as a cell phone company back then. Yeah. And so we thought corporate investors swooping in for Series A, quadrupling our offer, that must be crazy. It couldn't actually be worth that much. And so then as they start to have success, you have some regrets, but not a lot. Then when they sell to eBay, you're like, wow, that was a big win that we missed. But that didn't bother me much because there's a lot of big wins that we miss. What really bugged me recently is I hadn't really factored in how many alumni of PayPal have started incredible companies that we may have very well had the inside track on, the way the quote PayPal mafia
LinkedIn.
It just goes on and on, right? Yeah. And some more monsters coming. I mean, multi-billion-dollar companies that are like Palantir and stuff that are still private, all PayPal people. So that idea of the extended network of great people, right? So Apple alumni know this. I used to work at Next Software briefly. Like almost everyone.
You worked at Next with Steve Jobs. Did you go to that
I wanted
retreat?
To see him in action. He's my childhood hero.
Yeah. Did you go to that retreat in like Lake Tahoe where they made that famous video? No, you came
I wasn't
later.
there long enough. No. But I did some walks with him. Those were kind of cool.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you talk? You did a walk and talk with Steve Jobs. What was your
It
walkie
was
talk
fascinating.
about?
I was like watching him get this guy who had just quit come back, and again this challenge. He's like, I know you can do better. I know you can do more than that. And it was just like watching the reality distortion field come into laser focus. And this guy's like, okay, so I'd left and accepted another job, but I'm back and I'm running the program again. And it was just like amazing.
He just flipped him.
Mm-hmm. We went through 2 VPs of marketing that one summer. So he's just like, out of here, like he doesn't suffer fools, right? And you can tell where you are on that hero shithead roller coaster, as they called it. I got him to agree to let me do a sort of a case study on him and his managerial style. So
really?
Just get access. I thought that was a good excuse. I mean,
why do you think he was just so awesome?
That's a great question.
I mean, what was it that was awesome about? Because you do hear these stories like, oh my God, he was like the distortion field, or he was vicious to people, or he was amazing, inspiring to people. I mean, you worked alongside him, you spent a little time, so what do you think it was that made him special? Because all these stories are from people who didn't spend any time with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult personality type. There's like the clinical diagnosis, there's the magic of his integrative and whole sort of, also sort of the system level design approach to things, much like Elon Musk. There's analogies, Elon from the engineering mindset, Jobs from a marketing mindset, of how do you take something and boil it down to its essence. So for Jobs, it was elegance and design, the dematerialization of things down, like no buttons, to even simple things like initially to have the mouse not require hardware, all these things that he was fanatical about. Were either lucky or prescient in a way that was subconscious, and that he would never say, the reason I'm doing this is because if we dematerialize the phone, then the software and services layer is in the cloud, and we can do updates more quickly, and wouldn't that be a great way to leverage into all kinds of other business models that give us sustainability when the hardware itself's a commodity? I mean, like, those words would never come out of his mouth. Right. He'd be like, this is beautiful, and this is shit, and like, this is like the level at which he talks, but it would be directionally perfectly correlated with a movement to a services world when you dematerialize the hardware. He also has this sort of visceral agitation from what I almost would describe as the visual noise of imperfection. So if he sees anything that's imperfect, it's almost like synesthesia. It's like it gives him an unpleasant feeling. Right. And how do you replicate that, right? You don't teach that in school, so I don't.
It's almost like a superpower. It's like ugly shit is his kryptonite.
Right, exactly.
And so if you bring him into a room, it's like, oh my God, this Samsung is such a piece of shit, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, Steve Jobs, like, no, here's this. And he's like, oh, that's not kryptonite.
That's exactly right. So I brought him an Apple II keyboard before I worked with him. And this is actually how he recruited me to join him. It was the extended keyboard. It was the one Apple shipped at the time when he was at Next. So it was not under his auspices. And I was like, would you sign this? Because I'd Woz's signature on it. It just led Steve Jobs. And he's like, this keyboard represents everything about Apple that I hate. I'm like, okay. Like, look at all these function keys. Why are they? And it was a beast of a keyboard. Like in the PC era, function one. Do you ever use that? Do you know what it's for on a Mac? No, hell no. He's like, and he took out his car keys. Boom. What about this function key? Boom. He basically eviscerates the keyboard for all the keys that no Mac user should ever need and look more like the original Mac keyboard. And he's like, then he'll sign it. And he signed it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He had to lose some keys.
And he actually said, and this is when you wonder if he's being just over the top cheesy, or because he said it total straight face, changing the world one keyboard at a time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Next was an amazing vision, but it didn't work. How do you think that changed him?
Yeah, he came back a different person, right? So Apple version 1, Apple version 2. I think what drove him crazy is being stuck in an enterprise software sale, because he founded the company with the idea of going through K through 12 education, or maybe more like universities to start. And kind of the old model, let's do what I know best, sell to education, build this thing called a PC/workstation, which is a crazy product category, but it's kind of like halfway in between a Sun workstation and a PC. A little bit higher end with all this gorgeous object-oriented programming and interface building code, but then that hardware model doesn't work. Make long story short, he ends up being stuck in the enterprise software business, which is hard for him to get fired up. It's like at conferences, he literally would try to get the crowd going about a billing system for MCI. Like, we've made this so much more efficient, for MCI to bill their customers. Like, who the hell cares, right?
Yeah.
I mean, his heart was always at Apple. He had always on the walks talk about Apple. It always would end, what should Apple do? They should buy Next. And I thought, are you crazy? What CEO would bring you back and expect to keep their job, right?
Right.
Like, how is this ever going to happen, right?
Right.
But
it did.
Yeah, it killed him that Apple was under sort of like, it's almost like your baby has really abusive step-parents,
Yeah.
It killed him.
So let's talk about Apple today. Tim Cook, is he destroying the company, as some people feel, with not going after market share? Do you feel he's preserving the legacy and maintaining margins? You see these weird things happen, like iOS 7 has got everybody split. It's either horrific, it would never happen under Steve Jobs' watch, or it's exactly what Steve Jobs would have done. And then crazy stuff like Tim Cook flying to New York to meet with Carl Icahn, and that's his priority, or that's what he's doing, which Steve Jobs would fire his assistant if his assistant told him that Carl Icahn was on the phone, right? Like, who meets with Carl Icahn? Steve Jobs would never meet with Carl Icahn. We all know that. How do you rate Tim Cook's performance?
I don't know. This is the one, of all the questions, this is the one where I'm, probably least qualified to give an answer anyone would care about, because I don't work there now, and I love Apple, but I don't watch it that closely, so I'm not like an Apple company fanboy anymore, if you will. I mean, I love the products and services and thinking about where they're going, but don't really have a good answer for you.
Really? All right, that's honest. Well, let's talk about...
And all big companies are eventually stumble, right? And it will be interesting to see whether the culture of Apple, that Jobs spent so much time engineering, things like where do people sit, who gets kicked out of meetings, how do you keep meetings small, thinking back about some of those process innovations, that was what he believed was his greatest creation. And it's an open experiment whether that cultural infusion, that DNA of the firm will propagate despite who's trying to run it up top.
Google. 10x, moonshots, just unbelievable ambition with Google X. What do you think of just Google's newfound ambition and scale under Larry Page?
Oh, it's awesome. So I participate in the Google X retreats that they have. So for whatever disclosure, that's where sort of ideas, and I've.
Well, what is that exactly? Just
so they pull people off to an interesting place and invite outside ideas that they call ahead of time. That unfortunately a lot of journalists misreport as this is what Google's doing. But what it just means is they've spoken with these groups, and they may acquire them like McConaughey Power or hire the people like the lady who wants to be able to read your brain, Mary Lou Jespin, that's a fun one, from those events where they meet them. So it's kind of a recruiting thing.
So the woman who wants to read your
brain? They do these brain scans when you watch a lot of videos, and then you, like PET scans and what have you. And then you can show additional, new content, and then just from what that brain scan is seeing, deduce what the person's seeing. That's the, no, that's how we should put it. That's sort of like a pretty invasive kind of thing that was beyond Google Glass. I mean, this would be the whole head mesh that only was not a product, right? But she was just giving an example of the kind of crazy ideas that are floating out there. Crazy in a good way. Crazy. Remember, for me, crazy is good. So don't take that as a negative. That there's a series of different researchers working at different stages that show that first you can reverse the optic nerve with a chemical dopant that's not that nice. It's only animal studies, but they got that step working where you can go from memory to optic nerve stimulation. Separate group has shown that you can make the retina a display, that those rhodopsins that are used for light detection can also, in reverse stimulation, become an output display. So in theory, you could read your mind from your retina.
So,
but that's not working. It's not working, but that'd be like the Google Glass,
you could create your own holodeck in your own brain.
Yeah, or create a portal into what you're thinking or dreaming. Dreaming would be more fun, right?
I think I saw this was Strange Days.
Yeah, yeah, with the tape, with the literally wide tape.
Yeah, it was like they had a tape. Yeah. It was the Catherine Bigelow.
And the snuff films, yeah.
It's fascinating.
How that influences us all, yeah. Yeah, so that could be a digression.
Go back to Google.
Back to Google. So this is just, why is this a good thing, what I just said? So to be open-minded for really bold breakthroughs that could have an enormous impact. So you think about the autonomous cars, that are all the public stuff that's been discussed, autonomous cars, things that don't feel like the obvious next step for a search engine, right? What do they have in common? Almost everything Google's doing in advanced projects and research relate to how can you apply machine learning in an industry that hasn't really been revolutionized much yet. And because that's what they do well, right? That's what is under the covers of the image recognition algorithms, why they bought a quantum computer. That's another crazy one I'm involved with, the quantum computer company. And Google bought one to do machine learning. And they think it's a path to AI, which is their goal long term. And so if you just take that filter, which I'm also applying in the investment domain, I think that's a really interesting investment thesis to say, don't look at any one industry or company, but say, how does a process like machine learning change many different industries, and use that as the pivot
Which
point.
one are you doing now? Is it machine learning, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, how does that apply to things like how to build better systems in agriculture, how to build what are the ones I'm looking at? Robotics, clearly. I think it
Where
probably...
will robotics be in the next 10 years? I mean, it's been a while since Rodney Brooks started, showing us stuff like, hey, here's the future, and, we get the Segway. It's sort of got robotic potential. Where do you, in 10 years, how robotic will life be in San Francisco?
In San Francisco? Oh. I'm not sure.
A place where people adopt this stuff pretty easily.
Yeah, because in the near term, so I'm trying to think over 10 years, what new consumer robots are going to come in?
Let's take 20.
Well, there'll be something near term that is kind of interesting, led by Rodney Brooks, and there's more than one company doing this now, which is humanoid robots for the workplace. So the reason I hesitated about San Francisco would be, I'm not sure if it'll percolate into, even though I bought one of these just on a lark, the average person doesn't really nor do I, have a real use for it yet. But in a work context, these are two-handed robots right now on a pedestal, so they don't walk around, but you program just by moving the arms. So anybody can program. My 13-year-old programmed the one in our office to just move cups around.
This is the new iRobot?
Yeah, it's called Rethink Robotics. It's called Baxter.
Really.
So it's a big red thing, but it's safe in the sense that you don't need to be coordinated off. You can bump into your head and it won't hurt you.
Right.
But most importantly, kind of like that Apple II moment, mainframe, expensive, only people who know how to program robots use them, and they're expensive. To hey, you just buy one of these, plug it in the wall, right? And it's a friendly robot you can trust, kind of like if Jobs were marketing it.
Yeah.
And the way you program it is an unskilled laborer who's doing a job they really don't want to do and make them go just nuts, put things in box all day long. Just take the arm of the robot and do that same task, and then it just generalizes and does the task. And it learn, and so again, this how do you do things that feel like magic in some of these learning algorithms? So every customer 3D prints actuators for whatever they're doing, and the robot just looks at what's on its hand, sees what pixels move versus the background not moving, and that's what I've got to work with, and no programming.
So the programming is you go do it.
Yeah, you just do it. It's learn by example. And it does all the other things like how do I not hit myself? How do I deal with, something's in my way? All these, you don't program any of that. It handles all those higher level cortical constructs almost. So stepping back, the connections between Google, these robots and everything is that I think over the next 5 years and 10, all of the products and services that feel like magic when you first see them, the autonomous cars or maybe Siri for a month, felt like magic, will be because of machine learning, because we'll be using those algorithms and techniques and processes to build things that exceed human understanding. And almost by definition, that's that magic moment. And we'll keep not calling it AI until there's enough of them that it's pretty much everything that we consider to be human, right? So we have speech systems, we have vision systems, we're going to have actuators, and but that's not human.
So you subscribe in our lifetime, there'll be machines that will be indistinguishable from humans? Or
they'll look ugly or different, but they'll be indistinguishable in terms of capabilities.
So in the next 40 years...
And our lifetimes will be longer than that.
Well, yeah, and our life. So let's go to that life extension. That's a good. Thanks for that segue there.
Yeah, you can make any forecast in our lifetime if you just assume a lot of life extension.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Google recently started a company to do life extension.
Yep.
Or to do. Is it explicitly life extension?
Well, they're a little hazy. Critics say it's just biotech, but I suspect when they talk about longevity, this is a code for and there's a group of people, several different groups. There's an Ellison contingent, there's a Peter Thiel funded contingent, there's a new X Prize coming out, Longevity X Prize, a friend of mine's doing, and I'm actually an advisor to, in terms of full disclosure, that are saying, in general, let's look at the entire health problem in a way that no typical healthcare entity does today, where you're saying I need to get a solution that can get through a regulatory environment and get reimbursement, right? That's what everything, and so they tend to be point solutions to a particular situation, like, pattern baldness or erectile dysfunction
asthma,
or heart disease, or pick it. As opposed to saying, might there be a common cause of all of those problems? Where if I could address it at a different level, none of those things happen. Sort of address aging itself. Why do we age? Is it an inflammatory system response going wrong? Is it a mismatch between the evolutionary balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system responses, where in a fight or flight hunter-gatherer society, your body needs to react to trauma in a way that in modern society, it's purely counterproductive. And one of the groups is saying, let's just use that insight to try to do something that you would never.
So we just turn off our adrenaline and our adrenal glands and stuff like that, and we'll all be walking around totally not scared?
I don't have the answer to that.
This is the start of a great science fiction movie.
I wouldn't jump to that conclusion because I'm not sure how they're going to exactly tap into this insight. Would they go to such an extreme? Probably not. Are there ways, though, if you know that, to mediate the response?
So to throttle our flight response so that it's not damaging our
Think about
bodies.
vasoconstriction, everything that relates to all those disease states I mentioned, as well as almost every other.
They are stress
including
related,
dementia,
right?
you can tie them all to these same root causes. Like, what do we do? Why don't we deal with the root cause?
That's going to be a fascinating double-blind study. We turned off fear in this half of the population and not this half.
Well, that's funny. There's actually a parasite that does tilt humanity in that direction. The T. gondii from cats.
It gets rid of the fear molecule?
It dials it down a little
Clearly
bit. You
that's
don't
what
notice it
happened to Elon,
at
right,
the
to
individual level, but
no
in
fear of
cultures
running
that have
companies.
macho men cultures,
Yeah.
they tend to have more incidence of this parasite, like in South America, and their traffic
really?
risk accidents go up as the metric. Yeah, it's a parasite that transfers from cat feces to humans. It makes rats completely fearless, and they get eaten by cats, so it's like a mental virus. There's a whole bunch of those cool things in nature that literally the parasite hijacks the brain of the host to make the host do its bidding.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool. It makes you feel a little less, like you know who you really are.
And what's going on. So when you look at entrepreneurship, and we've had a long discussion here, and you boil it down, and you look at this process and selecting companies, and you have to make bets on behalf of these LPs and all this kind of stuff, you see some pattern in what makes great entrepreneurs today. What do you think that is?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. First, there's a lot of diversity, so it's hard to boil it down to like, here's what, and certainly no person should try to fit a mold they're not in.
Right.
But there's certain things you notice that correlate with success, like having enough self-confidence to be humble. And so I love, somewhere on the wall there, oh wait, did it? Oh no, yeah, work hard, yeah, but was it stay humble? Yeah. That's really important, to be continually learning, because the underlying goal is to not think you have all the answers and to hire clones of yourself because you have all the answers. The way an entire corporate DNA could percolate out could come from that simple observation that, do you think you know it all, or do you know some small part of it and you need to bring other talent on board? So it's one of the reasons why most successful startups have a duo at the founding team. Jobs had his Wozniak, even Larry Ellison had his Bob Miner, excuse me. Obviously Bill, Gates had, Paul Allen. They're very different personality types. You might say, well, maybe there's a marketing head and there's an engineering head and an extrovert and an introvert, and how could you be both? Maybe. And that may be one explanation for why a pair seems to do better than a single, but it could also be, again, process-wise, that the mutual respect they have for each other at the founding DNA of the firm might percolate out to everyone else you hire, being different, not clones, right? Not a bunch of cult of me, but hey, with diversity from the very beginning. And that cognitive diversity point comes back. So that's why when you focus on any one entrepreneur, well, is it the entrepreneur or the way in which they embrace others in their entrepreneurship, right? Is it the way in which they sculpt the patterns of communication in their firm, which is again very abstract. Exactly. Yeah. What do you mean? But the things that are common, of course, throughout is having passion and conviction. Something that there's something broken in the world and you're going to fix it. Right. That unwavering, unquenchable desire to make a difference is really important. Not only because you stick through tough times, the way the Elon Musk stories from before sort of speak to, but you also motivate others to join you on ideally what is a purpose-driven business, not a profit-seeking business, right? So another side adjunct that I'm only recently appreciating. I mean, a different question would be, been doing VC for a long time, what did you learn now that, not until now that you finally learned it?
Yeah, what have you learned this year,
Yeah, it's like this year, it's this purpose-driven business, the benefits of it. It's like, why is it that I think it's fair to say the three companies that I'm involved with that are doing the best are the ones that had the least plausible path to profitability, or openly say, like Tesla does, profits are not our primary objective. That was in the last shareholder letter. First line, Elon insisted on it. And when some board members said, don't you mean for now, or during a growth phase that profits aren't a priority? I said, no, not as long as I'm CEO.
Right.
Yeah.
He wants to solve the carbon problem.
It doesn't mean that profit doesn't matter.
Right.
To switch the world to electric vehicles, if you had a crappy business that no one wanted to follow, you wouldn't succeed in catalyzing an industry shift. It's sort of it's almost like, what is the byproduct? Oh yeah, the byproduct is we better have a business that's self-sustaining, otherwise we will fail. Okay,
right.
Got to be cash flow positive, right?
Mood, yeah.
You got to do that, and then you got to have an attractive business that's better than the incumbent's business, so they'll want to copy you. It's kind of interesting. Or put a greenhouse on Mars. I mean, that's a bizarre founding premise for a company, SpaceX. Or the company here in San Francisco that is building satellites that really wants to make sure that at no point is their mission to not do SpySats, which every other satellite company does as their primary business. To do no evil at the founding level before they would even take a Series A investment to make sure that's locked in, that will never happen, right?
What do you think of America today?
I expected a...
No, I just think in general. I mean, listen, you're obviously, a fan of what we've done in terms of leadership, entrepreneurship on a global basis, but there are things that are troubling as well. We see the police state, PRISM, NSA, all that kind of stuff. We see polarization of wealth. When you look at this country, when you look at what it represents on the global stage, what do you think? I'm just curious because you have a lot of thoughts of other things.
Yeah, well, I think the American dream is still a powerful metaphor, and hopefully, over time, more countries have what is equivalent. I still think it attracts folks like Elon Musk, who was in South Africa and rationally thought America is still the best country on the planet to get great things done. And that he, even 2 nights ago when I was interviewing him, said that the United States, more than any other country, represents the distillation of the human spirit of exploration, to explore those frontiers, to, whether it's, when you're a nation of immigrants, collectively, and then it tends to correlate with entrepreneurship. And by the way, the Western states, if you also were, coming across by wagon after having immigrated generations back to the U.S., you've got a weird filter for entrepreneurial tilt, right?
Yeah. It's in our DNA.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then of course, that's why the immigrant correlation with entrepreneurs means so much. Both my parents come from Estonia, so I see that in second generation. Oh, good. I was wondering. We got at least some representatives I saw.
Yes.
Andreasberg. Yes. So anyone who wants to, relocate there, immigrant to Estonia, you can definitely, turn the table. So America is great in many ways. We have a constitutional democracy that's being challenged in some interesting ways around political corruption, as Larry Lessig and others will highlight, that is a bit worrisome. The accelerated rich-poor gap, I don't think is a U.S. phenomenon per se, because we're very philanthropic as a nation relative to some other nations, but it's not enough. I think it's an inevitable vector of society globally, and it's just that other nations haven't caught up to it yet. So China's going to get there soon, and it's already starting to happen in the difference between the coastal cities and the rural areas. That, in a nutshell, it's sort of in the big socio-political point of view, the thing that I'm worrying about the most, the only thing I worry about as a techno-optimist, is that if we erase the digital divide, which would be really kind of interesting, right? 3 billion people come online for the first time in the next 5 to 7 years with smartphones. This will help them tap into the global economy like never before. This is all good, right? It raises the bottom of the pyramid. It removes strata from the pyramid. But it inevitably, I think, transforms it from a pyramid into a conical spike with rich-poor gaps like we've never seen. I don't think they're going to be self-rectifying. And the reason is that when more and more of the economy becomes an information economy with winner-take-all network effects, what will people do? We may be at peak jobs in the traditional sense of employment. And the logic for that might be that if you think about the history of work from the Industrial Revolution, it was regionally sheltered. So by modern analogy, if you're a cloud outsourced Java programmer, you got to be good to get work, right? If you're a mediocre barber, you can have lifetime employment by moving to a small town. So it's still the case that, barbering, cooking, massaging, just be in a small place, you're fine, right, regionally. But the moment work that's meaningful is global information work, the competitive basis is scary.
We see with teaching in Coursera and Udacity and some of those.
And so that's great. And again, raising the bottom of the pyramid, everyone will have equal access, but it's also a global competitive landscape.
Right.
Everyone could do that job anywhere.
100th best math teacher could lose to the first best who teaches everybody on the planet.
That's right. So in that first Stanford AI course, I think the Stanford student that ranked the highest was number 43 there were 42 global students ahead of him. Right.
So if jobs go away, which it seems to be happening, what happens to society? Because we talk about these robots, we're talking
exactly.
about...
And robots are part of it, and AI. I think we'll feel it when AI comes, because then it's like jobs we want start going away. Right?
Yeah.
Robots get rid of jobs no one wants to do.
Sure.
Pretty much without exception. If you interview factory workers today, there's been a number of ethnographic studies, they hope their children don't have to work in factories. It's kind of poignant and believable. Yeah. And that's why the average age in the US in a factory is aging and aging and aging. The young people just don't want to go work in the factories. So we don't, I don't think, lament the loss of those jobs. We just have always assumed there'll be something better somewhere else.
Right, but there's not going to be.
Right.
You don't actually believe in your heart there's going to be.
No,
I don't believe in my heart there is either. So what happens?
So there is a post-scarcity nirvana of abundance that you can imagine that Peter Diamandis and others will write about, that says, well, we don't have to have jobs. This was a construct we kind of invented during the transition from feudalistic societies and slavery to society where, hey, you don't have all that free labor, here's how it'll work. Right? People will get jobs. It'll work. Trust us, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of...
We'll figure it out.
Right. And so in the future, even though we'll never hopefully enslave people again, nor would we need to, the robots are our slaves. So that sort of, you think about the economic balance, what does life look like when you have a bunch of free labor?
Right.
What do people do? Well, you have you have the Enlightenment, you have arts, you have people pursuing the sciences.
The golden era.
You have people wasting a lot of time on Facebook, the editing Wikipedia, contributing to the conversations of the planet, maybe in very meaningful ways, and finding symbolic immortality in their expression and contribution to the collective intelligence of humanity, but not getting paid a penny for it. Right? I mean, it's already happening with a lot of our slack time. I mean, we think we're working, but I mean...
So we're just going to have to figure out an economic model for all that.
Right. And so I could imagine a model on the other end that makes perfect sense, and I'm only now trying to think about, are there any investments today that could help us bridge the gap? Because what worries me is I don't see how we get a transition from here to there that's not really unpleasant.
No, I don't think anybody does.
Right. I mean, take medical care. How do you get to that society of abundance if you're worried about your health care and if you need income to pay for health care?
Right.
Everything else should be somewhat manageable. Every physical thing should be $1 a pound, eventually, at the limit. And you just pay for information products layered on top.
Fascinating. Let's take a couple of... It's going to take me a couple of weeks to process all this. Let's get a couple of questions from the audience. And so a clear, concise question is always valued as opposed to a promotion for your company. That's my little disclaimer. Okay, so we have a first hand raised here. How are we doing on time, Brandis? Hour 6. Perfect. I did it almost perfectly, got to the hour, and got to questions.
So you talked about SpaceX, Tesla. What about synthetic genomics, Genomatica, Gen 9, this whole synthetic biology space you've been investing in?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
let's get to that.
He forgot to ask.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's only so much time.
Synthetic biology.
Right.
Yes.
So re-engineering the genomes of organisms to do useful things. So we now have the capacity to write the code of life like never before. In the first generation of biotech, and what you probably, if anyone's not in biotech, you've heard the word Genentech, all kinds of companies, Amgen, over the years, and some different kinds of investors making money in that area. That was very much a cut and paste model. You had to find something in nature that was interesting, some genes, let's say, in the yew plant that you extract to then make an anti-cancer therapy, and you had to physically cut and paste these genes into other strips of DNA. It was a process that took a long time, and it was error-prone and only moved at a certain pace. In the era of synthetic biology, you literally just write the code of life as if it were a poem or a computer program, perhaps more accurately. Obviously borrowing a lot from nature to start because you don't know what to write. And that gets back to machine learning and complex systems. We'll get to that later. But you have the capacity to write just about anything you want. Send that file off to any number of labs that will synthesize these DNA constructs, and they FedEx you back the DNA. Now, at first, this was all used for research at the DNA level. And what was demonstrated by one of our companies, by Craig Venter, a few years back, is that you can actually boot up a living organism with the code, meaning an organism whose parents were on a computer and not in a living form, and the software creates its own hardware. More amazingly, it's what he called genetic alchemy. The way it physically works is you take a cell, a single cell organism, in that case a mycoplasma, destroy all the DNA in the native host. It's like a zombie. It is, in theory, able to live a little bit, but it has nothing's going on because there's no DNA. And you insert your alien foreign bolus that's been synthesized in a chemistry lab with no animals involved. So this DNA coming in, just think of it as chemistry lab creation. And then this organism reproduces trillions of offspring, and it is now an entirely new species, as different as mouse and man in terms of genetic difference. The fact that cells were that plastic, that you put new DNA and the cell could become a different animal, hadn't ever been shown before, but it's an important step to make this vision a reality. So why do you do this? Well, it dramatically increases the pace of experimentation. So unlike Biotech 1.0, which is a physical cut and paste, here you're dealing with code. So you first just lay out exactly what it is you want, right? So in these experiments, they just, for a lark, they put, poems and, quotes from famous people and their web address and all this stuff, just because, you can, it's arbitrary. But you could also do all kinds of high throughput experimentation on variations. So there are now both two companies we're involved with are building robots that will create millions and perhaps billions of variants per day. So what we would do is take something like some energy harvesting pathway where you take energy from the sun, something like chlorophyll, perhaps a rhodopsin, tune for certain wavelengths, what have you, and it does something interesting. And you've got a good solution to making a chemical or a fuel or a food product. And why don't we just test a billion variations on some key enzyme or some key pathway that are known to exist in nature in different organisms that have been found through other techniques that Venter also did, basically shotgun sequencing entire ecosystems at a time. just to get the code. And he did that going around ocean water. So you just like grab millions of organisms at a time, sequence everything. You don't know where they came from because you don't care. You don't need to cut and paste anymore. You just need what are all the genes associated with energy harvesting from the sun. Like going to the Library of Congress, ripping every page out of every book, and they're like, oh, that's a good haiku. I'll use that, and I'll use this. I don't even know who the authors are, right? And so that was a lot of background. Those companies you mentioned are all trying to do something very specific, like make a particular chemical that's usually made from oil today, and instead make it from waste, one form or another, glycerin, or maybe waste sugars or waste fats, and specifically make all of that petrochemical part of the economy without using the oil. So like the Teslas and the EVs of the world will get rid of the primary use of oil, which is transportation, and then the remaining use it could be done a lot more efficiently and effectively through these modern techniques. Now, it comes back to it's a complex system that exceeds human understanding. So, as soon as we move to multicellular organisms in the artificial domain, this is going to take a bit of a machine learning approach, not things that look like accelerated artificial evolution as the methodology, not here's what I'll write. So that metaphor is just not the way we're going to program these things.
Right.
So they're making great progress. We think this is a really exciting vector for change. A lot of students at universities today are very excited about this re-engineering of the information systems of biology. This is what it's really about in a way that was never possible before, and will accelerate evolution on many different levels, both in the traditional sense and in this new artificial sense, and will probably become the vector of evolution, that in the long arc, evolution itself starts, amino acids, DNA, cells, multicellular, then our brain, but then not even all of our brain, just the amount of cortex, the amount of memory is all that mattered. Then our artifacts and our technologies are going to be the vector of evolution directly through these organisms and indirectly through AI and technology constructs, and that's going to be all that matters, because every of those jumps I just mentioned, nothing changes at the lower level. At that point, it just keeps going to the highest level of abstraction, and the pace of change is so much faster that it makes it look glacial down here. Right? We haven't had a new neuron in a long time. We haven't had a new piece of amino acid in a long time. You don't do that, right? You just move to it's the brain. Okay, now it's society, constructs, culture.
So, Ventnor was talking a couple of years ago. I talked to him about these algae fields to do energy, and where's he at with that? And
right. Well, ExxonMobil didn't prove to be as dedicated a partner as you might imagine. No big surprise. Big Oil really just wanted the marketing benefit for a green program to try to stave off a carbon tax. And so when that threat of a carbon tax went away, they're like, well, maybe we won't spend $600 million with Craig Ventnor like was originally planned. But to their credit, they are still working, because they're really intrigued on some breakthroughs they made, tuning the photoreceptors in chlorophyll to actually make them less effective, so that at the organism level, it is less good harvester of light, but then at the population level, you can build a system where you harvest light more effectively several feet into the substrate, not just at the surface, where they absorb all the light and block it and shade the ones below. So there's a new wave of potential interest for that, but more importantly, we don't think fuel is where you want to go. Anything you burn is not going to command a good profit margin.
What about organs? We see a lot of progress in organs.
Oh yeah, so we get into 3D printed organs, but specifically for algae, they make omega-3 rich food.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they do anyway. All the omega-3s in your fish come from the algae the fish eat.
Right.
Same for a lot of the carotenoids, things that make the flamingos pink come from the algae they eat, not from, if you don't feed them that algae.
So Soylent Green, we're going to make some pretty awesome food.
Bingo, but it'll be omega-3 and omega-6 rich Soylent Green, not recycled humans, but other crap from humans. Yeah, literally.
What about printable organs? How close are we? We see experiments going on.
Organo Novo showed a kid on stage. I met him that has a kidney that was printed. Seems to be holding up. It's low volume right now.
Yeah.
And that's probably where it should be for now, because it's high value, low volume, but I don't know, will that be the same technology used to make synthetic meat, which we have to do?
Synthetic meat requirement because of population growth?
A whole bunch of reasons, yeah. First, agriculture alone, we need to grow more food in the next 50 years than since the beginning of agriculture, which is daunting. And if we actively embrace GMOs, we absolutely can do it. So we'll see. Europe might have a tough time. You don't know when that'll crack, but that's a whole other discussion. We can get into Europe if you want. But the meat is crazy, the way we make it. I love meat. First off, not a vegetarian. I put bacon on anything I could put bacon on.
Right.
And the reason I don't visit meat processing plants is I don't want to know what goes on there.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think about, here's an interesting thought experiment. If you think back 2,000 years, human civilization, and that's not that long ago for human. We're the same genetics as 2,000 years ago. But 2,000 years ago, humanity was really barbaric by modern standards. Right. 2,000 years ago, rape, genocide, and slavery were generally okay ideas for most people. That's a wild
Commonplace.
thought.
Yeah.
Right? It was not. I mean, I'm sure there were a few folks who kind of saw the light. This is not good, but that was the average point of view, celebrated in a lot of books, even religious texts. Today, we think that's barbaric. If you try to do the experiment going forward, what do we do today that's barbaric? That your future self will look back and be ashamed of? And I'm sure it's industrial meat production is one of them, right? I know that when synthetic meat comes, and it's good enough and indistinguishable, I will flip my moral stance and say, killing animals to get meat is wrong, because now I can get my bacon without that pig, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I can see that in myself. It's kind of weird that I don't flip now. I don't quite have that moral leap yet, but I can know that I will. And that I'll embrace that expansion of our circle of empathy. I can tell we're going to embrace animals.
Absolutely.
And that'll be the enabler.
Well, it's already started to happen when you see free, you go to Whole Foods and it's free range, and how was this raised before it was killed is part of the dialogue.
It helps.
Yeah, it's like
But
it's
you
still being killed.
neck and put it on
Part of the dialogue. Okay, another question. Go ahead. We're going to run over with the microphone. Awesome. Oh, the guy in the green shirt, I think, was next.
Oh, by the way, on meat, so a third of the arable land on Earth is for meat production. Cow, pigs, and chicken. It's the majority of water consumption. It's just unbelievably
There's this chicken
bad.
thing that Ev Williams and a couple of other people, Bistone, invested in, the Twitter guys, that's doing the mock chicken.
It's a funky chicken?
No, it's just mock. It's just not the funky chicken, but it's the mock chicken that actually the guy, Mark Bittman from the New York Times, was the food chef guy.
Is it the soy one?
No, I don't think it's soy. I think it's made from like a process, a different process, but he was fooled when he ate it in like a sauce.
On a Caesar salad,
in a sauce he was.
And then you think about like the pink slime replacement market, right? So for hot dog, I mean, that's where you can go in. But what I'm referring to is like it's this freaking steak. I mean, it's got and it tastes as good or better. And they've already figured out that if you put the heme from hemoglobin into, let's say, chicken, it tastes, cooks, smells, barbecues like steak. It's pretty cool. So you can engineer these things, by the way, to be healthier.
You could have like a chicken steak.
Yeah. And we're not invested in any of this. I'm just this is like something that I think is going to happen, and I wish I could. Yeah, go.
Talked about SpaceX, America, government. I'm surprised you guys didn't mention taxes and Bitcoin. My question is, what do you think about applying social software engineering standards to laws? So, for instance, source controlling all the legislation. Excuse me. Or maybe limiting things to, like, instead of 140 characters, maybe 140 words. Or calculating your taxes every time they change a law.
So I haven't thought about that because I just don't like to think about the law or talk to lawyers. Like we don't use lawyers for Series A investments. It just saves everyone a lot of money.
You just signed
it ask the entrepreneurs, did you screw us? I mean, is the term sheet and the legal docs that you just drew up the same? Anything you want to tell us? And we've never been burned.
Let's go.
Never been burned. And if you get burned by an entrepreneur at the wedding altar, you're going to get burned somewhere else.
You might as well just get burned early.
Yeah, absolutely. Flush it out early. So, but to your question, I don't know, but if I was to think what could help the process of lawmaking, I like the meta point. It sort of relates to something I was talking about earlier, that if you're thinking about how would you frame a constitution versus what law should be passed, you think at a different scale, especially if you're not going to be, the beneficiary of that law per se. And so you're on perhaps the right track. Is there a process improvement that could make all laws better? But then you have to ask yourself, who stands to gain or to lose in the current process, and it could get bogged down. So I like at least the thought experiment Larry Lessig's pursuing in Republic Lost of saying, the root of everything people complain about and circle around in Washington or outside of Washington when they look into it, all relates to the systemic corruption of the system, and not in the illegal sense, but the unfortunately very legal sense of corruption. And how can we just make absolute transparency on who is giving money, or limit it to a finite thing so you actually have a democracy of the people again, and then everything else gets fixed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking that in general, like in similar when you're building stuff and you realize that you have a warning error or you have a broken build or something like that, then you could quickly back out and look at that little piece that's creating all these big problems. So I just thought like maybe a source control of some sort where we could actually blame who did what when.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
GitHub for...
It's like a different transparency, but then you'd find that you just get totally depressed at like how things happen. Like take tax, for example. Every tax innovation has a sort of 2 or 4 year test period, right? And whether the experiment is a success or failure, it never gets codified into law. Instead, it comes up for another test period because it creates a new fundraising opportunity for all the constituents impacted by that on a recurring basis, as opposed to a one-time, I hit you up, we changed the law, okay, now we have a good law. It's just...
Yeah, let's take another question.
Oh,
yeah. Gina, you want to grab the microphone or just pass it? Yeah. Go ahead.
Because I've been chosen.
Yeah, right into the microphone. Yeah.
Steve, I just wanted, you started touching on agriculture, and I just wanted to hear a bit more about where you sort of see agriculture going and some of the things that really excite you. I know you guys have one investment, at least, in that space, but where do you see the future of that?
Yeah, we're probably now up to like 3 or 4 if you include algae, for consumption in that nutraceutical space or just food space. So with synthetic genomics, you have an algae food program. You also have a division that spun out Agratis that's doing energy crops, as well as things that produce oils in marginal soils, so you're not competing with food, doing it in rocky places like the Yucatan and what have you. And then we also have a company in Israel called Kaima that's doubling up the DNA in the plant germ cells. So imagine, as a very lay, rough approximation, you had 4 parents instead of 2. You would express the archetype of your species. Recessed genes would be more recessed, right? And it turns out if you do that, the plants grow quicker with larger fruit bundles, higher yields, more pest resistance, just about everything you'd want. And the best part of all is that it's not considered a GMO in Europe because you've not introduced a new nucleotide. You've done a really bizarre hack of the genome, but hey, everyone, including the European regulators, are happy to actually have technology that fits the fine print of their rules. And so they can do open field trials and no regulation whatsoever from a GMO sense. The things that we're also looking at but haven't yet invested in but very interested in are software layers and ways to aggregate the big data that's coming from everything from satellites, drones, and on-the-ground robots to improve yield. And some of the large agricultural companies are already showing that you can have incredible improvements, which have an enormous impact if you just take the subcomponents we have today, like a set of different GMO seeds in an array, and you have these precision farm trucks that know down to an inch exactly where they are, and they have different batches, and they put different seeds at different spacing densities based on a per meter sort of soil conditions, and change all the other related fertilizer and what have you to get at least a 20, sometimes more than 20% yield enhancement where nothing else changed but that use of information on a micro scale. So how does that create investment opportunities? Well, I think there's the robots that do this work, there's the information processing systems, there's the big data roll-ups, and then dashboards for farmers on how they want to manage things. The autonomous vehicles we're not directly investing in, but all the tractors are becoming autonomous and they have people sitting there just in case something.
What do you think
weird
about
happens.
the Tesla autopilot? You saw Elon just said, hey, if you want to report directly to me and work on this.
Right, so he's hiring, what he's referring to as a Twitter.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
Everything we learn comes to Twitter announcements by Elon, including the company.
We are doing we're doing autopiloting.
That's right. And interesting in the context, a bunch of other auto companies around the same time, around the Frankfurt Auto Show, announced timetables for their autonomous driving vehicles, which they had not before. And they were earlier than most people might have thought. 2020 on the outside, then another company says 2018, then Elon says 2016. So it's almost like an arms race on who can get there first. And of course, there's Google, right, off to the side. And then actually a bunch of others that are less well known than Google. And then there's, of course, Continental and Bosch, who have developed technologies that, as suppliers to the automotive industry, that could enable all these folks. So the recent Daimler demos was a partial Daimler, partial Continental solution. So autonomous vehicles are inevitable, right? I'm hoping my kids never have to drive. And that's the timetable I'm counting on. And I think, given the driving age here, that I'll just get them off to college, and hopefully they don't drive then it'll be widely available. But there will be vehicles before then. There will be vehicles driving around in certain contexts within a couple of years, but not doing everything. Doing some parts of it. So the 2 big categories are highway lane keeping, things that look like cruise control, made better, like just kick back and it stays in one lane, but if you want to change lanes or get off, that's when you take over, right? That's going to feel like
the autopilot.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to feel like cruise control, and I think the big auto companies hope that it gets regulated. It's almost like boiling the frog, little baby steps. Well, that was fine. Well, why can't we do this? Well, why can't we do this one step further? Right? And then hopefully no new regulation comes. That's what they want. Yeah. Because their biggest fear, and the reason they were holding back, is that somehow if the car drives itself, does liability shift to the manufacturer?
Right.
Which they don't want. they have a lot to lose if that happens. Much more than that new product line. They could lose more on their installed base of business than whatever this new opportunity affords.
Yeah.
That's why they won't likely lead that charge. And then the other one is a low-speed city driving, like go park somewhere. Just go. Like,
drop you off in the front of the building.
How nice would that be, right?
Yeah, drop you off in the front and go park.
Exactly. And then you'll see the TechCrunch joking, hypothesis, but obviously it's a real vision of the future. Is the Uber equivalent of the future? Why have a driver, right?
Yeah. Okay, drones.
Yeah, drones. Yes. So slightly illegal.
This is the best interview ever. I'm just like,
right.
Drones, go. America, go. I just wake me up.
Land of the free and the brave. Next, drones. Drones are cool. Barely legal now, I guess. But
barely legal.
Yeah, it's exactly.
You make it sound so salacious.
Yes.
Yeah, barely legal.
Yes. So I think it's smart that folks like 3D Robotics realize that you can get all kinds of interesting exemptions by flying over private lands like a farm, which is their open strategy, and waiting for the law to come, which is supposedly going to come and should come to make it more available.
FAA is saying no drones.
Well, no. They're saying we're going to make it legal, but they're putting this timetable where it's like then it'll be legal. Not now, but then.
Right.
Like,
they just
coming up.
But it's illegal now. So sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
But who's going to catch them? Right? They're fast. Do it at night.
Exactly.
Right? No, I'm just kidding. But I think we all anticipate that there's a regulatory regime coming that will make these broader use, and so there are all kinds of things you can imagine in urban centers for package delivery between hubs, like in Mumbai during a traffic jam, as stepping stones delivering viruses in Africa to remote villages when there's muddy roads. There's all kinds of interesting things, and then ultimately, as you think about where this might go in a way that we'd all be like, wow, more than a toy, this is something I could use, would be the vertical takeoff and landing electric vehicles, right? A car you get into that's flying, and maybe supersonic if it's Elon's version of that. Because if it's not supersonic, why would you?
What's the point?
What's the point?
Exactly.
And it's kind of neat because you think about all the problems with aviation and the dream of flying cars. It's getting a pilot's license. It's like even the really cool new designs that were built around this amateur license thing that was created to make it easier to get a pilot's license for recreational use. It's just too much work. So you want autopilot, right?
Right.
And that could be pretty interesting. I think, of course, the bigger near-term benefit would just roll that right into every airplane, commercial airplane. I mean, we're almost there now. Like, why have a cockpit? And think about how you don't need the TSA if you don't have a cockpit. Bring whatever you want on the plane. You're under video surveillance. You do biometric to get on the plane. We know who you are. This would be a really bad place to just do a knife fight.
Yeah.
Why would you do it?
Right.
You're stuck in there, right? We're going to know who you are. We're going to get more data on than if you did something nefarious.
And you can't possibly take over the plane.
Right. And the worst you can do is kill that one plane. You can't aim the plane at something, so why worry about what you bring on it?
Yeah.
You can do more damage in a shopping mall or a stadium or a movie theater, unfortunately. It's a sick reality, but it's like, why is the plane interesting? It's not if you can't steer it.
Interesting.
Yep. So that would be the cool drone.
Last question.
Yep.
Who's got the microphone? And here we go. Final question from our audience. And then I will let people. All right. Is that it? Oh, well, here we go. Okay. Last one.
You talked about agriculture. What about the other side of kind of urbanization trends and people moving into cities and kind of increasing housing density? Where do you see kind of some opportunities in that space?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's a good thing. We just crossed that 50% mark, and Stuart Brand, the environmentalist, argues that's one of the three big essential things for humanity: is urbanize, GMOs, and nuclear. Unusual for an environmentalist. But I believe all three.
Urbanize, GMO,
accelerate urbanization, embrace GMOs. He says that the environmental movement's opposition to genetically modified things is the worst thing they've ever been wrong about. And then nuclear energy.
You agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there may be some worse ones. I can't think of one, though. I mean, there's been 2 trillion meals served. More people die in Germany from organic farming every year than have ever died from a GMO. I mean, it's silly. Now, there are systemic risks in the way companies like Monsanto create a monoculture. That's a whole other thing. Hating Monsanto, that I can understand why some people might be irate at any one company's tactics. But the concept of a genetically modified crop, it's how do you modify it? In Europe, what they do when they can't do GMOs is they chemo and radio blast the hell out of it with radioactivity and chemo blasts to randomly mutate like crazy, and that's totally fine in Europe. Do just weird mutants, but as long as it's something you've done through one of those weird processes, then you can breed it.
And nuclear.
Nuclear, obviously nuclear gets better, but it's in a different regulatory regime than others. And whether China in particular builds more coal or more nuclear plants for their baseload is going to be the climate change pivot point. That and meat, right? Meat would have a bigger impact, by the way. But getting off oil or getting off meat, we'd have more benefit getting off meat as a planet. It's worth thinking about. But in terms of traditional focus, base load, it makes a huge difference. Stuart Brand also points out that it's wonderful. Actually, I translate his quoting of the World Health Organization study, which basically looked at Chernobyl and all of its aftermath and who died and from what, with a long-term study, including deaths that are distant and delayed and slight increased chance of cancer and this and that. And the basic conclusion is more people died from the human dialogue than the activity itself, meaning fear of nuclear energy has killed more people, this is the World Health Organization conclusion, than nuclear energy itself. Just the stress-related health risks. Remember when the Scuds were hitting Israel and more people died of heart attacks than the Scuds? It's the same concept. And so when people do fear-mongering about nukes and don't actually look at the data or around GMOs, they should occasionally realize they're killing more people in the process of the human dialogue.
We haven't had a new one in this country since the early 70s.
Yeah. It's a tough regulatory thing. So Gates has got this new design. The U.S. is hopeless. He tried Russia. Now he's at China. And even then, it's going to take till 2020 before they have a test plant.
This is a spent.
Take nuclear waste, burn it like a Duraflame log. You don't
drop a couple little chips
transfer
into oil, into water, and it boils.
No. They keep it in a. It's actually complex to keep it in a solid form without it.
Right.
Anyway, you build this thing, you put it in the ground, it runs hot for 60 years. No one could move it. You're not moving any nuclear materials around the planet. You just drop it. It's like a battery.
Right.
That runs for 60 years and gets rid of nuclear waste. Kind of interesting, but different regulatory regime, right? So more. Did you know that coal miners experience more radioactivity than nuclear power plant workers? Radioactivity. Of course, more die. 100,000 in China alone every year from the air pollution from coal. More than nuclear energy has ever killed through any possible study you could look at.
Yeah.
So nuclear, we have no investment in nuclear. So I say this it's obvious that we need to embrace this somehow as a planet.
And it seems like
whenever coal is the alternative.
The countries and the political systems our political systems can't solve these huge problems. They can't solve the fact that it's so obvious that coal is not the solution and nuclear is. They just can't seem to get it done, and it becomes the opportunity for the entrepreneur.
Right. You have a lot of vested money and interest in clean coal, baby. We got coal to make it clean.
Now it's clean.
I got elected by those people. Damn, right? You know how that happens, right?
Absolutely.
But the original question, what was it? Urbanization, right? So we dodged that one. So you put the nuclear plants so that you can actually live in the cities and breathe the air, right? I mean, we got a little taste of that. I mean, what the heck? What's burning? Do we know what that is, by the way? What was it?
There's a fire in Napa.
A fire in Napa, that far away, right? So imagine that's like a good day in Beijing, right?
Yeah, it's
just painful. I mean, people that come there, they're really
they're going to take 10 years off their life in those kinds of cities easily.
Oh yeah, there's 100. They don't like these studies, but 100,000 deaths per year in China alone because of the coal pollution and the air pollution that results in those particulates.
You led the we'll end on this. You led the $24 million round on AngelList. The syndicate thing seems to be a pretty big deal. I signed up for it in a week, $750,000 on top of my typical $50,000 to $250,000 investment. Seems pretty real to me. I can almost do an A round. Kevin Rose is at 1.5. Last I checked, he can definitely do an A round on his own. Why did you lead that investment, and what do you think of the AngelList syndicate program?
I think it's great. I mean, we are always interested in new ways to provide capital to entrepreneurs who need it, and we've always thought that there are many more ideas out there starving for capital than are getting it. And the reason you don't hear this from many venture capitalists is they like the business as usual model because it's a close-knit community and life is comfortable. And they might say that there are too many companies getting too many dollars, even in the dot-com boom, or pick any bubble you want, like too many dollars chasing too few deals. Is what they keep saying. But there's a sample selection bias. You don't know all those entrepreneurs that may have withered on the vine and never made it to a press event because they just withered, right? And so the idea of more democratized funding is something we've always supported. We even took a company public that was trying to do this. That didn't work for regulatory reasons and much other stuff. But Tim Draper, in particular, founder of our firm, has had that passion from the day one. And so we like these experiments. And from a venture firm perspective, having access to a wider array of entrepreneurial ideas is a good thing. So, and a way to think about that is it's almost like if you in theory could see every business plan, you'd know if something's unique. You'd know if there are barriers to entry because, well, there's only one of those that chances are there's barriers to entry, and if someone else tells me that there are, but that I see 40 of them, then they're probably not. So the more you can see, you don't have to be smart sometimes, you can just use statistics to figure out where something radically different and new might lie. So we like that. The more we can see, the better we can be at picking uniqueness. And then Rachel Pike, who works with us, spends time with AngelList quite a bit, hangs out in their office, and we'll see. I mean, this idea of syndicating investments is something that's kind of new, and we're in the middle of experimenting with it as we speak.
I'm going to do my first one next month. It's going to be interesting. All right, listen, we could go on for hours, and we have. Let's thank Steve Jurvetson for sharing so much wisdom with us tonight. Don? Wow, they like you. They like you. And we'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
That's it. We did it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome.